The Quarantine. High Administrator Vextal stood before the Collective Council, their crystalline form refracting the soft light of the chamber into prismatic patterns across the curved walls. The emergency session had been called with unprecedented urgency, and the tension in the chamber was palpable. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in tiered rings that stretched up into the darkness, all focused on the holographic display hovering in the center of the chamber. Distinguished members of the collective, Vextal began, their voice resonating through the neural interfaces of all present. What you are witnessing is not a simulation. These are real-time observations of human expansion over the last solar cycle. The hologram showed a rapidly spreading network of colonies and outposts, branching out from Earth like a viral infection across the galaxy map. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their gravity couches as they watched the acceleration of human territory. In mere decades since achieving faster-than-light travel, they have established colonies on worlds we deemed uninhabitable. They've modified our technologies in ways that defy our understanding, and their population growth rate exceeds all predicted models. Senior Counselor Zinra, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate metallic shell, pulsed with concern. They're adapting too quickly. The simulations suggest they'll reach Class 1 civilization status within a single generation. Precisely, Vextal continued. But it's not just their rate of expansion that concerns us. It's their fundamental nature. The hologram shifted to show various human activities across their colonies. They approach the universe with a reckless disregard for established protocols. They experiment without proper safeguards, modify technology without understanding the consequences, and worst of all, they seem to thrive on chaos. The chamber erupted in murmurs as footage played of humans testing experimental drive systems, terraforming planets through unorthodox methods, and reverse engineering collective technology, with seemingly little regard for safety protocols. They turned a quantum communication relay into what they call a space coffee maker. Vextal said, their crystalline form flickering with distress. It shouldn't be possible, yet somehow it produces better stimulants than our approved synthesizers. What do you propose, High Administrator? Zinray asked, their energy form pulsing with anticipation. Vextal gestured, and the hologram transformed into a complex geometric pattern. Project Containment. We've developed a quarantine field unlike anything attempted before. It will enclose their entire solar system in a bubble of altered spacetime. They'll maintain their current level of technology and development within the field, but they won't be able to expand beyond it or receive outside influence. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. It was Counselor Ethimer, representing the ancient archivists, who spoke first. We've never attempted to contain an entire species before. The ethical implications are outweighed by the risk they pose to galactic stability. Vextal interrupted. We're not harming them. We're simply limiting their sphere of influence until they mature enough to join galactic society properly. The debate raged for what felt like cycles, but in the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. Project Containment would proceed. 3 solar months later, Vextal stood on the observation deck of the Collective's flagship, watching as the quarantine field shimmered into existence around Earth's solar system. The massive energy barrier was beautiful in its complexity, a masterpiece of collective engineering that would ensure the safety of galactic civilization. Field stability at 100%, reported Chief Engineer Clara, her tentacles moving gracefully across the control interface. The humans appear to be studying it. Vextal zoomed in on several human vessels that had approached the barrier. Instead of panic or anger, the humans seemed to be treating it like a fascinating new discovery. Some were already attempting to scan it with their primitive instruments. Let them study it, Vextal said confidently. The field is based on principles they won't discover for millennia. We've engineered it to be completely impenetrable from the inside. As the fleet prepared to depart, Vextal felt a surge of satisfaction. The human problem had been solved elegantly and humanely. In time, they would thank the collective for this intervention. But had anyone bothered to study Earth's history, They might have noticed a pattern. Humans had a peculiar habit of turning prisons into laboratories, obstacles into opportunities, and limitations into inspirations. The quarantine field shimmered in space, its perfect geometric patterns reflecting the light of distant stars. And inside, humanity looked up at their new ceiling with something that their would-be wardens had failed to recognize. Not fear, not anger, but curiosity. The experiment had begun, but perhaps not the one the collective had intended. Adaptation. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating above her desk in the Lunar Research Institute, her eyes reflecting the complex patterns of data streaming across it. 6 months had passed since the appearance of what the media had dubbed the cage, and humanity's response had been anything but what their alien wardens expected. "Run the simulation again," she commanded, and the AI assistant projected new patterns of energy waves interacting with the barrier. The quarantine field structure was unlike anything humans had encountered before, but that only made it more fascinating. "Dr. Chen," called out her colleague, Dr. James Rodriguez, from his workstation. "You need to see this." He transferred his findings to the main display, and Sarah's eyes widened. The barrier wasn't just containing them, it was teaching them. Every probe, every test, every interaction with the field generated data that revealed more about the fundamental physics the aliens used. It was like having access to the most advanced physics textbook ever written, if that textbook happened to be wrapped around your entire solar system. "They really didn't understand us at all, did they?" Sarah mused, making notes as new data poured in. "They gave us the biggest research project in human history and expected us to just accept it." The Lunar Research Institute had been transformed into humanity's premier research facility, with scientists from every nation working together with a unity of purpose never before seen. The barrier had done something the aliens hadn't intended. It had given humanity a common goal. Meanwhile, in low Earth orbit, Commander Lai Wei of the International Space Station Complex watched as another test vessel approached the barrier. The ship, barely larger than a shuttle, carried what the engineering team called a quantum mirror, a device designed to reflect the barrier's own energy back at itself. "Test vessel Curiosity approaching designated coordinates," reported the pilot, initiating quantum reflection in 3, 2, 1. The ship's experimental device activated, and for a brief moment, the barrier rippled in a way they hadn't seen before. Lai leaned forward, his heart racing. They weren't trying to break through. Not yet. They were learning to speak the barrier's language. Back on Earth, in the sprawling underground facility beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Maya Patel supervised the construction of humanity's largest quantum computer network. The entire facility was designed based on principles they'd learned from studying the barrier. "It's like they handed us their entire technological framework and said, 'Don't touch,'" Maya explained to a visiting UN representative. "Every attempt to contain us has revealed more about their technology. The barrier isn't just a wall. It's a library, a teacher, and ironically, our gateway to understanding their civilization." The quantum computer network was already performing calculations that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The aliens' attempt to limit human development had instead accelerated it beyond their wildest predictions. In orbit around Jupiter, automated research stations monitored the barrier's interaction with the gas giant's magnetic field. The data they collected was revolutionary, showing how the aliens manipulated spacetime itself. Each discovery led to new questions, new theories, and new breakthroughs. Dr. Chen's team had recently discovered something particularly interesting. The barrier didn't just stop things from passing through. It actively processed information. Every probe, every scan, every test was analyzed by the barrier's own systems. It was, in essence, a massive alien computer wrapped around their solar system. "They built us a quantum computing shell," Sarah explained during an emergency conference of the World Science Council. "And they didn't realize that by studying how it processes information, we're learning how their entire computational framework functions." The conference room erupted in excited discussion. Humanity had always learned fastest when faced with constraints, when given problems to solve. The aliens had given them the ultimate puzzle, and solving it was transforming human civilization. In orbit around Mars, the first prototype quantum transmitter was nearing completion. Based on principles learned from the barrier, it represented humanity's first step toward matching the aliens' level of technology. It wasn't designed to break through, not yet, but it would allow humanity to speak to the barrier in its own language. "They thought they were putting us in timeout," Dr. Rodriguez joked during a break between tests. "Instead, they put us in the galaxy's most advanced classroom." As Sarah watched another set of test results come in, she couldn't help but smile. The aliens had made a fundamental mistake in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed isolation would limit human development. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed: a challenge, a mystery, and most importantly, a reason to work together. The barrier shimmered overhead, its perfect geometric patterns unchanged. But inside, humanity was changing, learning, adapting. The aliens had tried to contain humanity's chaos. Instead, they had given it focus. The discovery. The discovery happened at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time in a small research pod orbiting Saturn. Dr. Maya Patel had been running another set of quantum resonance tests when her coffee mug started floating upward, defying the pod's artificial gravity. She barely noticed, too fixated on the numbers streaming across her display. "That's impossible," she whispered, but the equations didn't lie. The barrier wasn't just processing information, it was learning. And more importantly, it was teaching itself to be more efficient. Within hours, research stations across the solar system confirmed her findings. The quantum field that was supposed to be their prison was evolving, optimizing itself based on its interactions with human experiments. But the aliens hadn't programmed it to do that. They couldn't have. "It's not their technology at all," Dr. Sarah Chen announced to the packed auditorium at the Lunar Research Institute. "At least, not entirely. They discovered it, just like we discovered electricity or nuclear power. But they never fully understood what they were working with." The holographic display behind her showed the complex mathematical patterns they decoded from the barrier's quantum structure. They built this quarantine field using principles they'd learned through trial and error over millennia. But they missed something fundamental, something human minds, with our chaos and creativity, were uniquely suited to see. In the audience, High Commissioner Jackson of the United Earth Defense Force leaned forward. "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor." Sarah smiled. "They're using quantum fields like we first used electricity, following recipes without understanding the cookbook. We've spent 2 years not just studying their technology, but understanding the underlying principles. And we've realized they only scratched the surface." The quantum computer network beneath the Atacama Desert had been running simulations for months, testing theories that would have seemed impossible before the quarantine. The aliens had built their barrier using what they understood of quantum mechanics. Humanity had gone deeper, questioning assumptions that the collective had taken for granted for millennia. Commander Lai Wei, now director of the Orbital Research Network, coordinated the next phase of testing from his station near Mercury. "Start the quantum resonance sequence," he ordered, and across the solar system, carefully positioned stations began broadcasting precisely calibrated energy patterns. The barrier rippled in new ways, its perfect geometric patterns shifting slightly. To most observers, it would have seemed like nothing had changed. But in research stations across the solar system, scientists watched in amazement as their instruments recorded something unprecedented. "We're not just communicating with it anymore," Dr. Rodriguez explained to the World Science Council. "We're teaching it. The aliens built it to be perfect, unchanging. But perfection, in their view, meant stasis. We've shown it how to evolve." In her lab on Europa, Dr. Patel watched as the quantum patterns shifted again. The aliens had created the barrier as a static wall, but humanity had discovered its true nature. It was meant to be a dynamic, evolving system. The aliens' own desire for order and control had blinded them to its full potential. Every test we run, every interaction we have with it, Makes it more complex, more adaptive, she reported. The aliens thought they were giving us a cage. Instead, they gave us a partner. The breakthrough led to a cascade of innovations. New understanding of quantum fields led to advances in energy production, computing, and even medicine. Humanity wasn't just catching up to alien technology. They were pushing beyond it, following paths the collective had never imagined. Here's the irony. Sarah told her team during a late-night research session. They wanted to contain us until we were mature enough to join their civilization. But their civilization, with all its rules and protocols, had stopped growing. They'd reached a level of technology they were comfortable with and simply stopped asking questions. The quantum barrier still surrounded the solar system, still prevented faster-than-light travel or communication with the outside galaxy. But it was changing, evolving, becoming something new. And humanity was changing with it. In a secure facility on Mars, engineers were already building the first prototype of what they called a quantum dialogue system. It wasn't designed to break through the barrier. It was designed to work with it, to continue the conversation humanity had started. The aliens had created the perfect prison, using technology they thought they understood. But they had failed to account for one crucial factor. Human beings had a long history of turning prisons into laboratories, obstacles into opportunities, and limitations into inspirations. As Sarah watched the latest test results come in, she couldn't help but think that the collective's perfect quarantine was about to teach them a lesson they never expected to learn from the very species they had tried to contain. Breaking free. The day humanity changed everything started quietly. On 1,000 research stations across the solar system, scientists and engineers worked with practiced precision, each performing their small part in a plan 3 years in the making. No grand announcements, no dramatic countdowns. Humanity had learned subtlety from their studies of the barrier. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the central control room of the Lunar Research Institute, watching as status indicators turned green one by one. The quantum dialogue system they developed was now fully integrated with research stations strategically positioned throughout the solar system. Each station was both a transmitter and a receiver, designed to work in harmony with the barrier rather than against it. Final diagnostics complete, reported Dr. Rodriguez from his station. The quantum network is stable and synchronized. We're ready to begin the conversation. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. Send the first sequence. Across the solar system, quantum transmitters activated simultaneously. They weren't attempting to break through the barrier. They were talking to it, using the language they'd learned from years of study. The barrier's geometric patterns shifted slightly, responding to the communication. In orbit around Jupiter, Maya Patel monitored the barrier's response through the massive quantum sensors they'd built. It's working, she reported, her voice tight with excitement. The barrier is accepting our input. Beginning phase 2. The second phase was more complex. Rather than trying to disable or destroy the barrier, humanity had developed a way to work with it, to help it evolve into something new. The aliens had created it to be a perfect, unchanging prison. Humanity saw it as a living system, capable of growth and adaptation. Commander Lai Wei, coordinating from the Mars Command Center, watched as new patterns emerged in the barrier structure. Energy absorption rates are within predicted parameters. The barrier is accepting the quantum resonance patterns. What the aliens had never understood was that their perfect prison wasn't meant to be perfect at all. The quantum fields they'd used were naturally dynamic, evolving systems. By forcing them into a static configuration, they'd created an inherent instability, one that humanity had spent years learning to work with. They tried to build a wall, Sarah explained to the gathered officials in the observation room, but they used quantum fields that were meant to flow, to change, to evolve. We're not breaking their barrier. We're helping it become what it was meant to be. Across the solar system, the barrier began to change. Its rigid geometric patterns became more fluid, more dynamic. It was still there, still containing the solar system, but it was transforming into something new. Phase 3, Sarah ordered, and the quantum dialogue system shifted to its final configuration. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of years of research and preparation. The barrier rippled, its structure shifting in ways the aliens had never imagined possible. It was no longer just a containment field. It was becoming an interface, a bridge between spaces that the collective had thought couldn't be connected. "We're receiving the first trans-barrier quantum signals," Maya reported from Jupiter. "The dialogue is stable. We're communicating through the barrier." They weren't breaking out of their prison. They were transforming it into a doorway. The barrier was still there, still protecting the solar system, but now it was doing so under humanity's guidance, working with them rather than against them. "Send the message," Sarah commanded. Through the transformed barrier, humanity broadcast its first communication to the galaxy beyond. Not a declaration of war, not a demand for freedom, but an invitation to dialogue. They had taken the collective's perfect prison and turned it into something unprecedented. A quantum network that could span the galaxy. In research stations across the solar system, humans watched as their message propagated through space. They had done more than escape their containment. They had evolved beyond it. The barrier that was meant to isolate them had become a tool for connection, for communication, for growth. The aliens had tried to contain human chaos, to force it into their ordered patterns. Instead, humanity had shown them a new way. A path between order and chaos, between containment and freedom, between isolation and connection. As the first responses from distant stars began to arrive, Sarah looked out at the transformed barrier shimmering in space. It was beautiful in a way the aliens had never intended, its patterns flowing and changing like a living thing. "They wanted us to mature enough to join their civilization," she said quietly. "Instead, we're going to help their civilization mature enough to join us." The experiment was over, but not in the way anyone had expected. Humanity hadn't broken free. They had transformed their prison into a gateway to the stars. And in doing so, they had changed not just themselves, but the very nature of what was possible. New dawn. High Administrator Vextel's crystalline form flickered with distress as they faced the Collective Council once again. The chamber that had once voted to quarantine humanity now hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 1,000 worlds tried to comprehend the reports before them. "The humans have not escaped the barrier," Vextel began, their voice uncertain. "They've changed it in ways our scientists claim should be impossible." The holographic display showed the transformed barrier around Earth's solar system. What had once been a rigid geometric prison now pulsed with dynamic patterns, its quantum fields flowing in complex, beautiful configurations that defied the collective's understanding. Senior Counselor Zinra's energy form surged with agitation. How? The barrier was perfect, based on mathematical principles that took us millennia to master. "That was our mistake," came a new voice, and the council chamber fell silent as a human hologram materialized in their midst. Dr. Sarah Chen stood calmly before them, her image transmitted through the very barrier that was supposed to isolate humanity. "We'd like to thank you," she continued, addressing the stunned council. "You gave us the greatest gift possible, a chance to study your highest achievements up close, to understand them not just as users, but as students of the underlying principles." The council chamber erupted in murmurs as more holographic images appeared, showing human achievements that should have been impossible within the quarantine. They had not just matched collective technology. They had transcended it. "Your barrier was perfect," Sarah acknowledged, "but perfection, in your view, meant unchanging. You never realized that the quantum fields you used were meant to evolve, to grow, to change. You built a crystal prison using technology that yearned to be a living thing." Through the transformed barrier, humanity had begun reaching out to other civilizations, not with ships or weapons, but with knowledge. They shared their understanding of quantum dynamics, showing how the principles the collective had used for containment could be adapted for connection, for growth, for transformation. "We're not here to demand freedom or seek revenge," Sarah explained to the council. We're here to invite you to join us in understanding what these quantum fields can really do. Your barrier taught us more than you ever imagined, and now we'd like to return the favor. Across the galaxy, other civilizations had already begun studying humanity's innovations. The quantum networks they'd developed weren't just for communication. They were gateways to new understanding, new possibilities that the collective's rigid protocols had never considered. Commander Lai Wei, speaking from a research station near Alpha Centauri, the first human outpost beyond the solar system, addressed the Council next. Your quarantine forced us to look inward, to understand not just your technology, but ourselves. We turned isolation into innovation, containment into creativity. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity had taken the collective's most advanced technology and transformed it into something new. The barrier around Earth's solar system was now a hub in a growing network of quantum connections, linking civilizations in ways the collective had never imagined possible. We're not asking for admission to your collective, Sarah concluded. We're offering you the chance to join us in building something new. A galaxy where barriers become bridges, where isolation becomes connection, where fear of chaos gives way to embrace of change. High Administrator Vextal watched as their perfect prison transformed before their eyes into a gateway to new possibilities. The humans hadn't just survived their quarantine. They had used it to spark a revolution in understanding that was spreading across the galaxy. In research centers on 1,000 worlds, scientists began studying the principles humanity had discovered. The rigid hierarchies of the collective were giving way to networks of collaboration and innovation. The very nature of galactic civilization was changing, evolving, growing in ways that would have been unthinkable before. They sealed us away because they feared our chaos, Dr. Rodriguez remarked to Sarah after the council session. But they never understood that chaos is just the first step toward a new kind of order. The barrier still surrounded Earth's solar system, but it was no longer a prison. It had become a symbol of humanity's gift to the galaxy, the understanding that true growth comes not from containing chaos, but from learning to dance with it. As ships from 100 worlds approached Earth through the quantum networks humanity had created, Sarah looked out at the shimmering barrier that had once been meant to contain them. It pulsed with life, with possibility, with the promise of a future that neither humanity nor the collective had imagined possible. The experiment was over. The lesson had been learned, and the galaxy would never be the same.